Hello everyone, welcome to today's HQTS webinar. This is Dale Widener. Today we will talk about compliance under the new RoHS Directive regulations. First of all, the biggest question to answer, how do you pronounce it? Well, several accepted pronunciations are out there, but the most common of these are RoS, RoS, or RoHS. So take your pick or just sound out the letters, whichever works best for you. But for purposes of this webinar, we will use the pronunciation RoS. So we're going to cover 5 key things in today's webinar. The first one will be a background on RoS. We're going to be discussing the new requirements under the RoS regulations. We're going to talk about the impact of the restrictions on the 4 phthalates that have been added, responsibilities of various parties in the supply chain with respect to RoS, and what HQTS can do for you. So first of all, what is RoS? Well, RoS is the EU directive that governs the use of hazardous substances in electrical and electronic products, specifically restricting some substances. So how do we define electrical and electronic equipment? Well, it is any piece of equipment which depends on electric currents or electromagnetic fields to operate, as well as any equipment that generates, transfers, or measures those currents or fields. Now let's take a look at the development timeline for RoS. The original directive was originated in 2002 and restricted 6 hazardous materials found in electrical products. It finally became law in 2006. The next update to RoS came in 2011, and finally a new directive will go into effect on July 22nd, 2021. This new directive adds 4 additional restricted substances. They're phthalates for all electrical and electrical equipment. The only exception to these will be medical devices, monitoring equipment, and control instruments. The first directive that came into force in 2006 banned the use of 6 substances, including lead, mercury, cadmium, hexavalent chromium, polybrominated biphenyls, polybrominated diphenyl ethers. In 2011, the directive expanded the restricted category to all electrical and electronic equipment and adds optional testing for additional substances. This directive also established the CE marking directive, with RoS compliance now required for CE marks on electrical products. It also added categories 8 and 9 for medical devices, monitoring devices, and control instruments, and it provided for additional compliance requirements for these types of products. The 2015 directive revised 2011 and added restrictions for 4 additional phthalates as shown in this slide. Mentioned previously, this will go into effect in 2021. Under the new guidelines, mandatory testing is now required for 10 substances that have been banned from the EU. You can see the complete table for all these substances that are banned by RoS directives in our next slide. So here we see a comprehensive list of categories for electrical and electronic equipment that fall under RoS regulations. As you can see, the directive now covers all electrical and electronic equipment of any type. In fact, Category 11 was added to include anything that could not be classified in the list above that uses electric current or electrical magnetism of any type. If it does, regardless of the category, it is regulated under RoS. So now the question is, how could the new restrictions, the new RoS restrictions on 4 phthalates impact you and your business? Well, let's talk about them. So these 4 phthalates all fall into the family of chemical compounds typically added to PVC plastic to make it more pliant. They are often used to create soft buttons for instrument panels and car stereos. They're used as coatings on cable and wiring, and for many other things. The main concern is that these substances have a very negative impact on human health and in the environment during recycling and waste management operations. The restrictions on these four phthalates do not apply to toys because toys are already subject to increased restrictions. For any toys that fall under the scope of RoHS due to the use of electronic components, restrictions under REACH, R-E-A-C-H, take precedence. So what is required for you to comply with RoHS? Well, an adequate bill of materials and bill of substances records are essential for RoHS compliance. These must include the following information: all components utilized in the electronic circuit, all materials used in the item or product, and all materials used to join, fix, or connect components and parts in the item. Since use of these phthalates is ubiquitous in manufacturing, it's really important to find out now if your products fall under the scope of the RoHS directive. If they do, you need to act now to analyze your product composition. If they contain these substances, you may need significant response times for redesigning parts, testing the redesigned parts, certification, repacking, rebuilding inventory, restocking, and so on. If you're marketing products containing these substances at levels above the regulations, you only have two options. Either you have to use alternative substances or apply for an exemption with the European Commission. Both of these options are very time-consuming and costly as they require research and development, either in selecting the optimum alternative or in assembling sufficient technical documentation on their non-availability. Producers can expect additional costs of compliance in terms of increased investment in raw materials, plasticizers, and testing. Producers of electrical and electronic equipment using alternatives to these substances may have a competitive advantage by means of touting the health and environmental benefits of your product to consumers and workers in the plastic and recycling industries. So Section 3 now looks at the responsibilities for various parties in the supply chain with respect to RoHS regulations. We're going to look at three specific areas of the supply chain: manufacturers, importers, and distributors. So first, let's look at the responsibilities that manufacturers have. A manufacturer is required to develop a comprehensive set of system and procedures for proving and maintaining compliance with RoHS directives. This is all the way from sourcing the materials to putting into place certain production controls, to labeling and marks and documentation. As an importer of electronics and electrical products into the European Union, you must have similar controls in place as the manufacturer, because you must make sure that the manufacturer has done his job, and you have to be able to pass that proof along to distributors or sellers of your product, as well as archive that proof for up to 10 years. As a distributor of electronics and electrical equipment, you are the final step in verifying that the documentation is accurate. You have a responsibility to report when violations occur, and finally manage the withdrawal or recall of non-compliant products from the marketplace. So all electronic and electrical equipment should undergo laboratory testing to document compliance. The test report can demonstrate that your product complies with RoHS regulations. HQTS's world-class testing facility can confirm the level of all substances in your product and ensure they are always within the acceptable range of compliance before they are sent into the European Union. A declaration of conformity is also required for all such products. This is actually a self-declaration that your product meets all of the RoHS requirements. By making this declaration, you assume all responsibility for compliance with RoHS regulations. The declaration of conformity must include identifying information about you, about the product, and it must be signed by you or by one of your responsible employees. Keep in mind that if your product later is found not to be in compliance, the fines can be very significant. RoHS regulations require that all new electrical and electronic equipment sold in the EU must have the CE mark. This is part of the self-certification process, and it's designed to be visible proof of conformity. The CE mark indicates compliance not only with RoHS, but with all EU legislation. By affixing the CE mark, you are essentially taking full responsibility for compliance with all these regulations that apply to your product. You are legally declaring your product is in full compliance with RoHS and that you have documentation to prove it. As mentioned at the outset, this legislation is intended to address the use of hazardous materials in specific types of goods in Europe, so as to help prevent damage to human health and the environment during its entire life cycle, including disposal or recycling. So how can HQTS be of help to you? Well, a little bit about HQTS. We are one of Asia's oldest and largest quality assurance providers. We're backed by the industry knowledge and experience of nearly 1,500 professionals in more than 20 countries. We provide quality control inspections, factory audits, supplier evaluations, consumer product testing, production control and management, quality control consulting and training, and supply chain services throughout Greater Asia. HQTS provides various RoHS testing packages as shown in this slide. Not just testing, but also includes sample picking, the factory audit, and so on. Our extensive industry experience and technical know-how can be applied to every step of your export process to help ensure total compliance upon delivery to the EU. So testing of materials and components prior to production can ensure compliance with RoHS requirements. Factory and supplier audits allow HQTS to help you identify issues from the very start of your sourcing process. The key criteria of our factory and supplier audit are assessment of facilities, policies, procedures, and records that verify a factory's ability to deliver consistent quality products over time based on your requirements. So sample picking during the process is very important in guaranteeing integrity throughout production. HQTS has put into place strict transparency and anti-bribery policies that to help to ensure your samples are always chosen by us at random as an objective third party and not by your supplier. We can even give you real-time videos of the process to help you have peace of mind. Each sample has a unique HQTS tracking ID and is packaged with an official HQTS seal before being sent on to the lab. Our open and transparent process ensures that your test samples are accurately reflect the reality of what your supplier intends to deliver. So are we qualified? Well, certainly our involvement in industry trade groups reflects our deep roots in the industry, but it's really our certifications and accreditations, which you see here, are the real proof of our qualifications. All of these certifications and accreditations are easily found on the websites of the listed organizations. So we want to thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions about the content herein or questions about other ways we can be of assistance to you, please feel free to contact us and we're happy to help. We hope to see you next time. Bye now.